The FIA has just launched a deeper investigation into Mercedes' engine, and insiders believe it could be worth up to 4/10 per lap. We are not talking about a minor software tweak. We are talking about a potential 15 horsepower advantage, hidden inside one number, 16:1. That is the maximum legal compression ratio under the new regulations. But what if the engine reads 16:1 when it is cold, and something very different when it is at full race temperature? Pre-season testing is over. A power unit failure triggered a detailed inspection. Rival teams submitted formal technical evidence. And now an imminent vote could introduce a mandatory hot temperature test. If that test passes, Mercedes stays protected. If that test exposes higher compression under operating conditions, they could be forced into a mid-season engine redesign. Less power, new pistons, reworked combustion geometry, all while fighting for a championship. This is not speculation. This is regulatory escalation. And what happens before the Australian Grand Prix could quietly decide who controls the entire 2026 era. So let's slow this down and understand exactly why this escalated so quickly. Pre-season testing in Bahrain is over. All the data has been collected. All the simulations have been compared. And what should have been a quiet transition to Australia suddenly became something else entirely. It started with a power unit failure. One of the Mercedes-related engines suffered a significant issue during testing. On its own, that is not unusual. Testing pushes components to the limit. But this failure triggered a deeper inspection by the FIA. Not routine, not superficial, detailed. At the same time, rival manufacturers submitted a formal technical dossier questioning whether Mercedes' combustion design behaves differently once the engine reaches real race temperature. And that is the heart of this storm. Under the new regulations, the compression ratio is capped at 16:1. That is a hard limit. But it is currently measured cold, ambient temperature, static environment. No combustion pressure, no thermal expansion. Several teams believe that is where the advantage may be hiding. Because materials expand when heated, metal changes dimension, internal volumes shift. And according to technical theories circulating inside the paddock, Mercedes may have designed its combustion chamber with microscopic cavities or channels that count toward total volume during a cold inspection. So when the FIA measures the engine at room temperature, the compression reads 16:1. Compliant. Legal. But once the engine reaches full race temperature, around 130 degrees Celsius, those cavities may effectively stop contributing to the chamber volume. Pressure increases. Effective compression rises. If that is happening, the gain is significant. Higher compression increases thermal efficiency. Higher efficiency increases power output. Estimates suggest between 10 and 15 additional horsepower could be available. On high-speed circuits, that can translate to 3 or even 4/10 per lap. And in modern Formula One, that is not marginal. That is decisive. Now imagine what that means heading into the Australian Grand Prix. If Mercedes arrives in Melbourne with a measurable straight-line advantage, suspicion intensifies immediately. If they appear conservative, it raises another question. Are they holding back while the FIA investigates? Because here is the next major development. The FIA has proposed introducing a mandatory hot compression test. An additional measurement at real operating temperature, around 130 degrees Celsius, alongside the existing cold test. That proposal will be voted on by the Power Unit Advisory Committee. To pass, it requires a supermajority. 4 of the 5 engine manufacturers, plus the FIA and Formula One management, must agree. This is not a small procedural tweak. It is a potential mid-season rule shift. If approved and implemented around the summer, and if Mercedes fails that hot test, the consequences are serious. Not retroactive penalties, but forced redesign. Combustion chamber geometry must change. Pistons must be reworked. Effective compression must be reduced under operating conditions. Under the current development freeze, those changes are tightly restricted. Manufacturers cannot redesign freely. They must operate within limited upgrade windows, which means performance could drop instantly. Now consider the internal pressure inside Mercedes. Engineers must prepare for 2 possible futures. One where the hot test becomes mandatory. One where it does not. That means double simulations, double validation programs, backup specifications ready in case the vote passes. And every hour spent preparing compliance scenarios is an hour not spent chasing pure performance. That is how championships are influenced quietly. Not always through penalties, but through distraction. And there is one more layer. If the FIA clarifies that the 16:1 limit must apply at all times while the car is running, and later proves that an engine exceeded that value during competition, that becomes a technical infringement. In that case, disqualification from the event where the breach is detected becomes possible. Points lost. Results erased. That is the extreme scenario. No one is there yet. But the fact that further investigation has been launched tells you this is not being ignored. So as Australia approaches, the real tension is not just about lap time. It is about uncertainty. Will the compression loophole be closed? Will Mercedes be forced into a mid-season correction? Or will the current interpretation stand, allowing any potential advantage to remain intact? The vote is imminent. The investigation is ongoing. And before a single competitive lap is completed in Melbourne, the balance of power in the 2026 era may already be shifting. Now we move into the part that makes this truly explosive. Because once the FIA launches a further investigation, the issue stops being theoretical. It becomes procedural. And procedure in Formula One can change championships. Behind closed doors, the governing body is not just reviewing rumors. They are requesting documentation, detailed combustion chamber drawings, material specifications, thermal expansion coefficients, volume calculations under load. That level of scrutiny tells you something important. They are not asking whether the engine passes the cold test. They already know it does. They are asking how it behaves when it is alive, when it is running at full temperature, when pressure inside the cylinder is at its peak. And that is where the hot test proposal becomes critical. The FIA has developed a method to quantify how compression changes from cold to hot, introducing a mandatory test at approximately 130 degrees Celsius. If that test is approved by supermajority vote, it becomes part of the official homologation procedure. And here is where the danger for Mercedes becomes real. If their engine passes the cold test but fails the hot test, that specification cannot be homologated under the updated rules. No dramatic courtroom scenes. No public accusations of cheating. Just a simple, devastating outcome. That version of the engine cannot run. Which means Mercedes would have to present a revised specification. Lower effective compression. Less aggressive combustion geometry. Reduced power potential. And under the current freeze structure, redesign opportunities are extremely limited. Manufacturers can only use tightly controlled development allowances. If Mercedes is competitive, they may not qualify for additional development windows easily. So any redesign would cost tokens, cost time, cost performance. Now imagine that happening mid-season. 1 week you are fighting at the front. The next, you introduce a safer engine map. Slightly lower top speed. Slightly weaker acceleration. Just enough to change qualifying positions. Just enough to alter race strategy. That is how momentum disappears. But there is an even more dramatic possibility. If the FIA clarifies in writing that the 16:1 limit must apply at all times during competition, and later proves that an engine exceeded that value while racing, the issue becomes a technical infringement. And in Formula One, technical infringements during an event lead to disqualification from that event. Points removed. Results erased. Public controversy amplified. That is the hard scenario. No one has confirmed that stage yet. But the fact that it is even being discussed shows how serious the investigation has become. And remember something crucial. Pre-season testing is over. There is no more hiding behind test programs. The Australian Grand Prix is next. If Mercedes shows exceptional straight-line dominance in Melbourne, the compression debate explodes instantly. If they appear conservative, speculation begins about internal adjustments. Either way, every speed trap reading will be analyzed. Every onboard audio clip will be dissected. Every telemetry comparison will fuel narrative. Inside Mercedes, engineers must now prepare for uncertainty. A vote that could pass. A vote that could fail. A political compromise that could delay enforcement until the following year. Because there is also talk of a transitional solution. Allow 2026 to proceed under the current cold measurement. Mandate full hot compliance from 2027 onward. That would calm immediate disruption. But it would also allow any current advantage to shape an entire season. And that is why rivals are pushing hard. 3 or 4 tenths per lap is not a small edge. It is structural. It defines qualifying margins. It influences tire management. It shifts race strategy. And when an edge is structural, teams do not accept it quietly. So as the freight arrives in Australia, the real drama is not just on track. It is in the vote, in the documents, in the interpretation of 16:1. Because once the FIA makes its decision, the direction of the 2026 engine era will be locked in. Either Mercedes' concept survives intact, or it is forced into correction. And sometimes in Formula One, the most important lap of the season is not driven at full throttle. It is decided in a meeting room, before the lights even go out. And here is the part that could define everything that follows. Because once an investigation reaches this level, it is no longer just about one engine. It becomes about precedent. If the FIA decides that measuring compression only at ambient temperature is no longer sufficient, they are effectively admitting that the original enforcement method left room for interpretation. That is a powerful admission. And it sends a message to every manufacturer on the grid. Innovation at the edge of interpretation will be examined under operating reality, not just laboratory conditions. Now imagine the internal debate inside Mercedes right now. Do they push performance in Australia? Or do they protect themselves? Because every km/h advantage on the main straight will be noticed. Every unusually strong acceleration phase will be questioned. And in modern Formula One, perception matters almost as much as performance. If rivals believe Mercedes is extracting power beyond 16:1 under heat, they will not stay silent. Protests become possible. Formal queries multiply. Political pressure builds. And once that starts, the spotlight never leaves. But here is the deeper concern. If the hot test is approved and implemented mid-season, and Mercedes must reduce effective compression, they will not just lose raw horsepower. They will lose efficiency. And efficiency is what protects fuel consumption margins. Lower compression can mean higher fuel usage to achieve the same output, which affects race strategy. It affects lift and coast phases. It affects how aggressively a driver can attack in the final laps. That ripple spreads far beyond straight-line speed. And then there is reliability. If the original architecture was optimized around operating at a higher effective compression under heat, forcing it back to a strict 16:1 may require redesigning piston crowns, reshaping chamber volumes, recalibrating ignition timing, and adjusting boost pressure. Each of those changes introduces risk. And reliability under a frozen engine formula is everything. Now let's consider the political side. For the hot test to pass, 4 of the 5 manufacturers must support it, alongside the FIA and Formula One management. That means at least one manufacturer must side against Mercedes if Mercedes votes no. That creates alliances. And alliances create long memories. Because engine partnerships last years. If a vote forces Mercedes into mid-season correction, relationships inside the paddock shift permanently. But if the vote fails, something equally important happens. The compression debate does not disappear. It lingers. It becomes part of every race weekend narrative. And the FIA's credibility is tested. Because once further investigation has been launched publicly, inaction becomes visible. Now think about Australia. The first race of the season. Fresh expectations. New cars. New era. And instead of pure performance focus, there is regulatory tension hovering over the grid. If Mercedes qualifies on the front row with exceptional straight-line speed, the questions explode. If they appear equal to their rivals, speculation begins about internal engine mapping changes. Either outcome fuels narrative.